Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 205 of the Let's Talk Yoga podcast. I have a very exciting conversation lined up for you this week. But before that, there is a time sensitive announcement that I want to get your attention on. November 14th, which is just a few days from when this episode drops, I am offering a free yoga workshop for yoga teachers. And this is from gross to subtle, the art of deep cueing for yoga teaching. So if you are a yoga teacher and you are looking to go from more physical cueing to more experiential cueing and taking your regular students and your own practice to a deeper, more meaningful level, then make sure you sign up. This workshop is completely free, no strings attached. It is live. I will also be doing a recording of it and sharing that later. But the real value is to attend live and to practice this, learn this, and ask questions in real time. Okay. The link to sign up is pretty much everywhere. Go to the podcast description and sign up. Go to the link in my bio on Instagram, or even head to the Let's Talk Yoga podcast at letstalk.yoga/listen. Now that we've gotten that out of the way, I have Michelle Edmison back on the show. If you remember, Michelle was on the show a few months ago and we got really nerdy about the art of breathing. And being a physical therapist, she gave us so much context in such a relatable way in that episode. I will link that in the show notes as well, so you can go listen to that one after you finish this. Today, we are diving into the fascinating world of your feet. The feet are the foundation in yoga practice. I would extend that and say the feet are foundation to life in so many ways. And I have always been intrigued by the feet. And I've always wanted to do an episode on the feet on the podcast. And Michelle is such a delight to have a conversation with. I noticed that she was putting out some content about the feet a few months ago. And I was like, Michelle, can you please come on the show and talk about the feet? So we get into many different layers, right from why the feet are the foundation, okay, barefoot versus not being bare feet. We talk about the different parts of the feet from the toes to the arches. We look at the brain and the feet and that connection, the nervous system and the feet. And we look at functionality. We look at aging. We look at just how the nervous system works with the feet. There is so much that Michelle unpacks. And what I enjoy about Michelle's work is that she makes all of this so relatable and so efficient in many ways. You listen to this conversation, you will have so much clarity about the feet being your foundation. The one thing I would urge you to do is to watch this episode on the YouTube channel, because towards the end of the show, Michelle will pull out her foot model and we look at bunions, and she works with the skeleton of the foot. And she also does some demo of certain actions with the feet in parts of this conversation. So we always have a visual representation of these conversations on our YouTube channel. So I would encourage you, because it's anatomy, to go look at that one, especially for those moments in this conversation. Okay. So as always, there is a lot you will get out of this episode, whether you are an anatomy nerd or not. This one is something that will really help you move through life with ease. Enjoy this conversation with Michelle Edmison. At the end of today's episode, we share Michelle's free foot class that's available, and you can download that, get access to her other courses. She shares all of that at the end of today's episode. Enjoy this conversation. Hi, Michelle. Welcome to the Let's Talk Yoga podcast. I'm so glad that you are back.
So good to be back. I love your questions, and I love talking to people who are in the yoga studio and playing with movement already. And we get to talk about feet today, which is one of my favorite topics, I think.
And for listeners who don't know, Michelle was on the podcast a few months ago and we did a conversation about breathing. And if you haven't heard that, I would encourage you to finish this episode and go and listen to that one. So, Michelle, to kick things off, why are the feet considered to be the foundation of the body?
Oh, well, the obvious part would be that structurally they are the foundation. if you were vertical, and so most of us do want to be vertical, we want to be standing, walking. They literally are the interface with the ground. They are what everything else is built on. So if the foot changes shape in any way, it's going to have that direct biomechanical effect on all of the bones up above. It's up above. You can always like alter and compensate. But if you start with a good structure down below, it makes things much easier up above. If you start with not a very good structure down below, just like a building, anything you're building, it's going to be harder for everything else above. But I would say it goes beyond this biomechanical structural effect. There is this global postural effect more through the nervous system, so neurologically, and then also myofascially. So we're starting to appreciate the nervous system a lot more, anybody who's looking into movement. And there is essential information that should come from the foot, both stability and neurologically for movement accuracy. So we really want to think about what are the forces, what are the biomechanical effects, what are the myofascial pulls through the foot, because they set up everything when your foot hits the ground. So 100%, they are the foundation. It's where a lot of things start. If you're vertical, and then again, it can either make it easier or harder for your body if you want to stand, move forwards, backwards, to the side, whatever it is.
One of my earliest memories from childhood, or not earliest, but one of my memories from childhood is I used to watch my maternal grandmother's feet. And I was young, I was in school, I didn't have any exposure to feet health or anything, but I would notice this one very thing where she would grip her toes. And as she aged, she would do a shuffle with her feet. And of course, she's no more, and she had a lot of falls eventually. And now when I study the feet and I'm paying so much more attention to it in yoga practice, and I'm talking about it at the studio, I remember how I used to look at her toes grip and that shuffle she would do. And I would think something's off, and I couldn't put my finger on it. But now I understand in retrospect. So the question I'm getting to is, how do our feet change as we age, structurally, neurologically, and maybe even a functional perspective?
Well, that is such a fascinating question right now, because the first thing is our body is bioplastic and neuroplastic. So the inputs we put into it really have a huge influence on the quality of the tissue, the joints, the health. We know it's for our brain, it's for all of our tissues. And there's this phenomenon that's happened in the modern world, especially with feet. A change happened kind of in the 1970s where shoes really changed. So this idea of we want to see, well, how are feet changing through lifespan? If we look at the modern population, we can tell you some changes, and I'll go through a few that we've looked at, some age-related changes that are kind of reproducible. But we do know that we have a huge influence over that. So is it actually related to age? Or is it because of how we're using our feet and this use it or lose it principle, this principle of progressive adaptation, law of specificity, that we are what we do most often. And the big change that happened back in the 1970s, and it really maybe early 60s, was that we started adding support, cushioning, heel rise, rockers, all of these things to shoes. And literally prior to that, even Olympic distance runners were wearing pretty much a piece of leather strapped to their foot. And we know this. So this is one of the biggest problems with feet, is we seem to have this idea that making life easier for your feet, cushioning it, giving it support, having it tight, give it a rocker, make it so the foot doesn't have to do anything, is in some way good for our feet. And there's no other body part that we would brace and make their lives easy. We know you have to use a muscle to strengthen it. You have to pound on a bone to build it. You need eccentric lengthening through a tendon to give it tolerance to load. And then, so this is the problem, is we'll go through and we will see what feet do with age, but is it really age, or is it because of how we've been using them? So we do look at third world countries. We're trying to see how different the modern world in North America and Europe is compared to third world countries and people who don't have supportive feet shoes from a young age. But feet are very, very telling. It's kind of interesting, as you noticed with your grandmother, that we can see the changes in feet so much more than we can see changes in a hip or a neck or a shoulder. It's right there. So we see bunions, bunionettes, hammer toes, claw toes, mallet toes. We see fat pad migration. We see the arches changing. The transverse arch collapses. We get neuromas. The longitudinal arches collapse. We get these deformities and spurs. So it tells the story of how you're using your foot. So those changes, none of them are hereditary. We know this now. What is hereditary that can predispose you to these deformities is your mobility. If you're hypermobile, have more loose connective tissue, we know your life is going to be harder for all of your entire body because you have to be smart and strong through these bigger ranges. And if you don't, your body will claw, it will grip, it will tension. It's just trying to support you because you can't stabilize that big toe or you can't stabilize that knee. So your hip grips, your foot grips. And that's where we see these changes where we lose some of the foot core. We get these long tendons working so hard and they start to pull and twist and voila, we get these deformities. So it's going to be really interesting. And the yoga community, again, is so far ahead of so many other people because you're barefoot. So at least you are taking your shoe off. And yes, you're on a flat surface, which again, ideally the foot was made to be on a natural barefoot surface that has texture, has different shapes. There are certain nerve endings we want to stimulate. We want vibration, which is ground reaction force. We want 2-point discrimination, which is texture. And we want stretch, which is what happens when you get on a different shape. So that's the nourishment that those sensors in the bottom of the feet are looking for. And they're getting something when you get your shoe off and you actually stand barefoot on a yoga mat, which is great. But we do know, so one of the age-related declines that we know is that the sensitivity in the receptors on the bottom of the feet do have a somewhat characteristic decline. So by the age of 50, it takes 20% more force to go through the foot before those receptors perceive an input and then tell your hip, your brain to activate this muscle and move your body this way, that way. And by the time you are 80, there's a 75% decline in the sensitivity. So it takes 75% more input force before you even know that anything's happening, which makes so much sense when you look at this very common decline in balance around 50 years of age. Yeah, it happened to me. It's like, and I fight it and it's still difficult. And then also why like older people, so you mentioned your grandmother who is literally like shuffling and you can see they just don't, it's like they're blindfolded. They do not get the information that when you're young and you're agile, you don't even have to think about because your foot is giving you all this good information easily. So, but we do know that we can mitigate that and we can actually reverse it by, if you get microcirculation, so we want this circulation, which generally circulation is from movement and stimulation, stretch, then it can help with this nerve fiber branching. So that sensory decline can be mitigated, which is why we're seeing so much in the movement world on stimulation of feet and barefoot and minimalist shoes and textured surfaces and spiky balls and reflexology and all of these. We are realizing your feet should not be in these tight, supportive, cushioning. Feels so good at first, but it is the worst thing to do if you're already losing balance. So
no, as you say it, right? I'm thinking, you're right. We put our feet in cushions and we're walking around in a cushion all the time. So you're saying stimulate the feet, put them on different surfaces, okay, work on stretching those nerve fibers. And bare feet there's a lot of value in being bare feet versus putting your foot in a cushion all the time. I also noticed a lot of people think of their feet, especially women, think of it from a very external perspective sometimes, right? You're thinking, oh, pedicure, and I'll keep my feet looking cute. But there's so much below that. So can we talk about the connection between the brain and the feet? I was in a yoga class a long time ago, and the teacher just casually said something like, your brain is the furthest from your feet, and hence it takes a little longer for the message to reach your feet. And there was more context to it. And there's something else we say in yoga where the feet are your foundation, but we also say when you are upside down in inversions, the highest point is the brain of the pose. And so many times when you're upside down or your legs are up, the feet become the brain, and the message goes from top to down. So, and I heard you say this, if I'm not wrong, that a lot of our real estate, and I'm paraphrasing, real estate in our brain is for the feet. So what does that really mean?
Great question. And some interesting things to think about too with inversions. I hadn't thought about this, but when we talk about the brain, when you look at a brain, neural anatomy, it has something we call a homunculus, which means there's a map of all of your body parts in your brain. And you want that map to be clear. So, for example, the hand has the biggest amount of real estate. So we just look at how much of the area is actually devoted to your hand. And that makes sense because we use our hands so much, the dexterity expected in our hands. But there is a very large amount that's related to feet. So we call that the cortical representation. So that foot, how is it represented in your brain? Is there a clear map? So we ask, can you control your foot? Can you dissociate your toes, or at least big toe, from the other toes? That idea that if you do not use, so again, if you don't use it, you lose it. We have this classic study in neuroplasticity where, I'm not sure if you've heard of it, where they put gloves on a monkey so that, and I think it was only after 2 weeks. So if you put gloves on a monkey, after 2 weeks, you take the glove off, they lose that ability to dissociate and differentiate their fingers. Then, and I forget how long it takes, but it's not that long. If you allow them to, use their hand and start to get sensory input into it, they will regain the use of the different fingers and be able to dissociate them. So the map, and they were looking at it through an fMRI or something like that, that they could tell that the map blurred, that it got smaller, that there weren't as many neurons, and that is correlated that it actually, when you get the dexterity back, the area does get more defined, more density of neurons. And that's the foundation of neuroplasticity, that we know neurologically, we are adaptable, every single cell, until the day we die. The question is, what are you adapting to? So are you getting some differentiated movement in your fingers? Probably. Are you getting differentiated movement in your toes? And maybe not. So we have like some tests that we do when somebody comes in. Like, I have some expectations for a foot. And one of them is control. If you can't control your body parts, then we have a problem. That's a bit of a metric of how you've been using it, your sensory input, your motor output, and you should be able to control all of your body parts. So the brain is where that is all from. The brain is what controls everything. There's a large amount of intelligence, and it modulates with impulses from the joints and from sensory receptors. But really, the big smart guy that you want a clear map of is in that sensory motor cortex, which is that map of your body and your brain, and you want it clear.
I don't think we think often about it. The hands, the feet. Yes, people in yoga because it's barefooted. Yes. But with our cell phones and people being on laptops and screens and driving and their hands. So I think it's really something to think about. What about the nervous system? Do the feet impact the nervous system? Because so many nerve endings, right? In the feet.
Yeah. So the quick answer would be 100%. But you could divide it down into like different parts of the nervous system. So there's the autonomic nervous system, which is more where we have parasympathetic and sympathetic system. So fight, flight, freeze versus rest and digest. And then you have the nervous system that's more about movement and control of skeletal muscles. And nervous system is huge. So it definitely has more of an impact on the physical movement system. And we do know there are definitely connections. So nerves that wire together, fire together, which is how muscles work. We know that, parts of the foot activate with parts of the hip, which activate with parts of the core and all the way up, and that there's tongue to toe connections and all of these things. So nerves are wired. So lots of nerves in the feet, as you said. And so you stimulate those, you are going to affect the entire nervous system. And again, it does get complicated. So I would like to say that feet are just a wonderful way to tap into your parasympathetic nervous system. But it is interesting. There are some interesting emotional connections to feet. And so I would say that is not true with everybody. Some people are very uncomfortable and ticklish and almost protective and embarrassed of feet. So if you go and you stimulate somebody's foot or like massage their foot, it might not have a good effect on relaxing them. It might actually stress them out and tense them up. But it 100% will have an effect just because it's so sensory rich so experiment and see. But the world of reflexology, acupuncture goes after, acupressure goes after feet so much. Again, a large amount of the real estate is the foot. And so it is going to have a bigger effect than working on somebody's elbow or something like that. Yeah.
I'm glad you brought up those emotional states, because I was thinking as you were speaking, if someone's anxious all the time, does it show up in their feet in some capacity? I had a friend when I lived in India. I have never met someone who was that you couldn't touch her feet, because she was just so, not that I was touching her feet, no, but it was a common thing because we were in the dance company together. And I remember she would go to pedicures and massages because her feet would just hurt. And she could not have anyone touch her foot for even half a second. And and it was, I've never seen it was extreme to a point where you'd be like, she would run out of the room, like get out of the chair and run out of the room. It was there was also a very strong childhood trauma that she had been through. So I would always wonder if there was some link between that. But when you were saying this, I was like, you know what? Yes, I'm just very ticklish and extremely sensitive. And it's something that stayed with me because I've never seen something like that. Something I want to ask. Go ahead.
Yeah, I would just say, so that is very common in feet. And probably most of us out there will know that person who is extremely ticklish in their feet, very hypersensitive, can't step on a rock or something textured. So most of my friends were all around 50. We're experiencing all these changes happening right now. And it is amazing the number of people who have developed these very sensitive, ticklish feet. And one of the things we know, so tickle and pain travel in the same spinal tract, the lateral spinal thalamic tract. And when we see a decrease in those three sensory receptors that we talked about before, vibration, 2-point discrimination, and stretch. So those are the ones that are so valuable to give us the useful information to produce movement accuracy, balance, etc. We always see an increase in free nerve endings, which are pain and tickle. That again changes, and it's one of the things. A lot of us will go for pedicures, and you can tell the change when you go for pedicures. And so many of my friends, because when we go away for a weekend, we talk about toes and tongues and rib cages. We always talk about bodies. And a lot of my friends have noticed that they no longer are as ticklish when they go for a pedicure, that their feet are now not as reactive, because that isn't it's not an accurate movement or sensory response. That's that usually is a sign that there has been some either lack of mobility, which is one of the big things. So that lack of circulation, lack of stimulation, that area isn't getting the sensory input that it needs. And we call it a disafferentation, this characteristic change in the types of receptors in that area. So if you're one of those people, start stimulating your foot and just meet your body where it's at. It could just be standing on a little textured surface, like a welcome mat, maybe a little rubbing. It could be rolling with a tennis ball, but it gets better and does change. And it is a sign that you probably don't have good motor control, that you likely do not have good health in the joints. You need to get a bit more mobility into your foot, move the joints, maybe a bit of strength. So super, super common and a really good metric for how your foot is doing.
And I think you have some videos on this, right? I will pull those out and add them in the show notes so people can see what you are showing when you say rubbing the foot on the mat. I've seen all of that you did. I want to ask you a very simplistic question, and you're overqualified for this, but what are the functions of the toes?
Oh,
Gripping, balance?
So toes are for propulsion and stability. So every part of the foot is so specifically designed. It is this sophisticated piece of engineering where everything has a purpose. But your toes very much are stability. So we know, so you do not ever, gripping is never an optimal stabilization strategy. If it's gripping if you can't lengthen and control movement through it, like long and strong is what we always want, that eccentric functioning. If your muscles can't lengthen, they're gripping. If it's the back of your hip, if it's your jaw, if it's your back extensors, if it's your feet, that's always that they're doing that to help you, but it's because you don't have control and strength through that range. So it has to stabilize, and the only way it can is locking it down. So we always want our toes long, flat, and wide. There is no time where we really want you to claw your toes. That's not optimal. Unless you have you're going to fall over or something like that, then your body will do this. But we always want long, flat, wide. So toes should be wide. We want that 4-foot splay. And that's something we see if you go and you look at third world countries, they have this beautiful splay. You look at a child when they first start to walk, there's this 4-foot splay. And that does activate something called the tie bar mechanism, which is kind of like putting up a tent. When you tension those passive structures, it actually creates 30% of the longitudinal stability through your foot, so that you're ready for push off. So we call that high gear. So that's one of the big things. We do not want to squish our toes together because you're losing all that free stability. And then there's a better chance you're going to have to claw. So you want toes should be wide, long, flat, and they give you stability. So at least that 30% just from the tie bar mechanism, not even other things. And then their job really is at push off. So propulsion. So they're not very active at heel strike. They start to become loaded at mid stance. And then push off is when they're the star of the show. And the big toe is the biggest. It's your exit strategy is the big toe. So its purpose is, and that also does correlate. So we know toe flexion strength it's actually, it is the biggest predictive factor. Decrease in that toe flexion strength is the biggest predictive factor of falls in the elderly. So more than glute strength, quad strength, core strength is toe flexion strength. And it kind of makes sense. It's this, we call it this fall envelope. It's not your hip that's going to prevent you. It's you need to have that toe strength. So balance, stability. But we also know, and we're seeing it more and more in the young, so you'll see it with athletes on that toe strength is associated with vertical height. So you'll see it with, basketball players, and you'll see it with people who want to sprint and be fast. So it's associated with speed, vertical distance, stability, balance. So toe flexion strength is this fabulous thing to build into your routine if you're going to do something.
I'm going to take a quick I'm going to take a detour here, because when you said jump and speed, can we talk about ballet and ballerinas? And they go through so much articulation through the foot. And so that level of mobility, is that a good thing? Is that once your dance career ends, you go to a PT? How does that work?
Yeah,
Because that's
it's a tough
extreme. I
one.
look at their feet and I'm in awe.
Well, and I mean, when you're on point,
Mm-hmm.
it's actually very different. You don't really move through your foot. They bind and strap their feet. They have obviously
those shoes.
beautiful ankle
Mhm.
mobility that you have to have plantar flexion of like you have to be able to get into point that way. But as they're moving through their foot, they don't. They really don't bend their toes. They are locked into those point shoes. So other dancers, though, so you look at like somebody who does modern dance, who,
contemporary
barefoot
modern,
dancing. Yeah, so they're getting into a bunch of different positions and using it more. Again, it's a firm surface and you need to make sure you stabilize well, push off well, but they're actually spending a lot of time without shoes on. And shoes are a problem because, again, in about the 1970s, we started to get all of these things that made life easier for our feet so that we didn't bend our big toes, so that we had a heel rise and we never stretched the Achilles, so that we never actually used our arch. We get an arch support, and your arch is designed to be a spring. It isn't supposed to stay in that arch position. It is supposed to, it's one of your most powerful springs and shock absorbers in your body. So we need pronation, supination. And pronation is not tilt, that's tailor tilt, that's a collapse of the foot. Pronation is lengthen and widen, and then you turn into this rigid lever for push off. Lengthen and widen, and then push off. So that, yes, these changes in what your foot is designed to do and not using those structures.
As we're speaking, I have a very clear memory. I haven't really thought of it until now, where I saw India transition from being more barefoot and having slippers on and, just being more barefoot in the past 20 years, going to shoes. And now when you go to India, you will see a lot of these grandmothers and mothers, like anyone who is, I would say, above 50, 55, 60, 65, they now wear shoes. And they now put I remember I saw my own mother go through that transition and everybody in that generation. And we went from bare feet to being sold cushions. And now everyone thinks that's better foot health in so many ways. I'm generalizing, but I can see that transition.
It's worse than nutrition. Like nutrition, we're used to like pendulums. Do this, don't eat that, back and forth. But footwear has been so, and it's a little bit exciting because I think the pendulum's coming back, but it is a bit complicated. So footwear and shoes, the big thing is we all should be moving towards more minimalist shoes, 100%.
Okay.
But you have to meet your body where it is at. So if you grew up in a tight supportive cushioned shoe with a heel rise, you can't just take them away and then go barefoot and think you're going to be fine because you don't have the mobility, you don't have the control, you don't have the strength likely, but you want to start moving in that direction. And there is this thing that like a shoe is like a brace. There are times where we do want to give people a brace, and that's same with an orthotic, but it should be a transition that I'm going to give you this, but you're not allowed to use it unless you do your physio exercises.
Fair.
You should be doing toe dexterity, so toe flexion strength, work on the stabilizers of your foot. And then, in 3 months, let's see if we could get you into something that's less supportive. So it should be this regaining the prerequisites of your foot so you can become more barefoot. Having said that, if you're somebody who has a bunion structurally already, it's a big bunion, it's going to be very hard without surgery to bring it into an alignment where you can properly push through your big toe. Because again, your big toe should be your exit strategy. But if it is deviated, you're not going to get the right muscles working when you push through it. So we try to correct it and we work on exercises. And if we capture it early, we can start to reshape that foot. As the bunion really starts in the midfoot, we all see it's...
we see it on the side. Yeah.
Yeah, you see the bump, but it's not
Yeah.
really the bump that's the issue. It's the fact that with a bunion,
Mhm.
what you see is, so this will just give this foot a bunion. Not sure I'm supposed to do that, but it did. So this is one thing that changes, but what you always see is that this bone sweeps out. So the bunion starts at this traffic jam up here where this sweeps out and then this sweeps in. And then you see this bump here. So with the bunion, yes, we want to, get your toe spacers in, but you have to deal with this. And that usually involves releasing the arch. So you're going to have a bunch of tight stuff under here and then trying to stabilize this first ray, we call it, this medial column, so that you can get the right chunky, nice little muscles working. So it's not just about pushing this toe straight. It's this, the bunion starts here. This is where the stability starts to be compromised. You get this deviation here, and then this guy goes that way. So if somebody has that, then that's where we're like, hey, maybe we'll give you a hoka that has a 4-foot rocker, because we know you can't really push through a big bunion. Or a lot of people, if they haven't been using their foot right, will end up with this a hallux rigidus, where their big toe just locks. It doesn't move. So they can't push through their foot. And that's very common. They have no mobility in their big toe. And that is supposed to be like, that's push off. You need to, we need push off.
Yes.
You need that bend. So if you don't have that, that is exactly why then we would say, okay, let's put you in a hoka, which is the opposite of a minimal shoe, and we'll give you a 4-foot rocker. And the hokas have either like
I've seen those.
rocker, and then you can walk and you can actually get your leg behind you, because otherwise you can't. You run out of range and you have to do these short shuffly steps. You never activate your glute. Your hip flexors are tight all the time. So shoes can be a tool, 100%. You want to meet your body where it's at. If you have no stability in your foot, maybe we give you a little bit of an arch, but not too much. Maybe we give you a 4-foot rocker, a nice stiff heel counter to give your calcaneus, the hind foot, some stability for impact. So they're not evil. It's just know that there's a consequence with it. And you want as little support as possible, but as much as is necessary, which is the confusing part.
Yeah, because I've seen young 20-year-olds with perfect feet, as in no issues with their feet, in those big hoka rockers,
I know.
And they're just walking at the gym, and there's cushion. Now I don't think I can ever unsee it after this conversation.
I know. Yeah.
So what about the arches? Because there are different arches in the feet, right? And so what is the function of an arch? And then there are collapsed arches and flat feet.
Exactly.
So can you bring some clarity on the arches in the feet?
So the arches are designed to be a mobile adapter. So that idea that when your foot hits the ground, they should lengthen and widen. And the main arches are the medial longitudinal arch, the lateral longitudinal arch, which is on the outside, but not as big, but there was an arch there. And then the transverse arch, which goes across big toe to pinky
little toe. Yeah.
So those at push off, they will be lengthened and widened. And then as you go to push off, we get the windlass mechanism and the tie bar mechanism. All those passive structures tighten. They bring you back into a supinated position, and you become a rigid lever to push off of and move forwards. So very efficient for moving forwards. But then you come back to heel strike. And they should lengthen and widen. So shock absorption, it's your spring again, mobile adapter. So we really want to be able to move through our foot and be able to go through these phases of pronation, supination. And like one of the things, so classic tests, I do a few classic tests, but one of the things for a foot is you have to be able to move through your foot. So even if you squat, you should see the foot lengthen and widen as your knee comes forward. And a lot of people, they come forward and you'll see instead of that lengthening and widening, the tibialis anterior, maybe you said the feet, they claw, this thing will pop up like that, and
Yes.
their arch actually rises. And then you can't actually squat as far. You can't
Because it's all
move as far.
tense.
It has to get, exactly, it has to get out of the way. And I always think pancaking. So often after we mobilize people's feet, we'll say, okay, now I want you to think about like melting. When you walk out of here, your foot should pancake when you walk over it and not be rigid as you're walking. So that is the beauty of this little system. And we don't see that in primates who aren't vertical. Like transverse arch does not exist in primates who haven't developed the ability to walk upright, which is only us, I believe. I don't think anybody else does for very long. So yeah, arch is so important. Toes, so important.
Do you think that, I mean, this is something I hear at the studio, so I'm going to ask you, do you think women age differently in their feet compared to men? Because things I've noticed is women, especially if they're perimenopausal and beyond, they experience more heel pain, and there's just more like burning in the feet sometimes. I see bunions only on women. I've never seen it on a man. So I'm wondering, do women age differently in their feet than men?
So there are some global systemic things that we get to deal with that men do not. And 100%, it does make it a bit harder. The biggest thing are these changes in estrogen around the perimenopausal years that, from what I've seen, estrogen is incredibly protective for connective tissue and helps with inflammation. So connective tissue is what we call the white stuff. So it's not muscle. Muscle is vascularized red stuff. And then we have the white stuff, which are tendons, ligaments, fascia. And estrogen is very protective for it and helps with that decrease in that inflammatory response. And so we had a lot of painful attachments, big attachments in the foot. So Achilles, plantar fascia, attachments in the hip, all of the shoulder attachments, they take a beating when estrogen fluctuates. The other thing is that women, we do know, have a decrease in muscle mass, lean muscle mass at this, associated again with hormones often. And it's also preferentially more the fast twitch fibers. So we are going to have a hard time keeping our muscle mass compared to men. They keep it a little longer. It does hit them too, that age-related sarcopenia or decline in lean muscle mass. And when you lose strength, again, your body's reaction is, I got this. I'm just going to tense you up. So you start to see, you lose mobility. You become less dynamic. You become more rigid. So our rib cage is stiffer. Our foot gets stiffer. So we really want to guard our strength. So we need to fight for it and get our reserves early and then fight to keep it, nourish ourselves, try to keep muscle mass on us, because the stronger we are, then usually, the more mobile we are, our body doesn't have to go into the gripping, clenching, tension strategies. And we see that a lot, and it all goes together, it seems, where we get more cortisol, we get tenser, more anxious, we get stiffer, less dynamic, fighting for strength and stability. And so that is a perfect storm for your foot if you no longer have estrogen to protect your connective tissue, all the white stuff. So the plantar fasciitis, Achilles tendonitis, all of these. And then we're also weaker and we're stiffer. So again, the foot is this beautiful mobile adapter. It's supposed to have strength. So women get it's a tougher transition for sure. And you can definitely, be mindful of it. And this is where I think all of us are moving that way. We're trying to do a bit more strength training. We're adding in more mobility work, and feet should definitely be part of that.
And I think there's a lot more awareness now, at least in some circles, with the feet. And I see a rise, at least locally, in plantar fasciitis. Like so many people walk in and say, they said I should do yoga because my feet are just so tight. And also
Yeah.
sedentary
Mhm.
lifestyles, right? You're
Mhm.
working up here, you're not working in your feet as much. So,
Yep.
so
Mhm.
I mean, I know we can go on and on and on about the foot. There is so much, and you do such a fantastic
Yeah.
job of making this interesting. I always, when I see your material, you take something that I would say is heavy duty anatomy and you make it very relatable. So, what would be your top three, no, and you can
Mhm.
change that number, non-negotiable practices for healthy feet?
Okay, three.
I mean, you can
We'll
make
start
that
with three
10, you
because
can make it
it's yes.
5, up
Okay,
to you.
but I do like the three because we all get overwhelmed with things.
Mhm.
So there's more power in being having some ones at the top of our mind. So number one does go back to shoes. We spend
Mm.
so much time in shoes. If you are doing good things with your shoes, you don't need to spend nearly as much time strengthening,
Mm.
mobilizing, restoring alignment. And I know this is a tough one for everybody, but try to have some shoes that don't squish your toes together.
Mm.
So that's the first thing. Even if you have a big arch support and a heel counter and a rise, some shoes that don't squish your toes together because it's unbelievable the number of things
Mhm.
that work better when you have that 4-foot splay.
Mhm.
And one of them is you will never get life in those toe flexors.
Yes.
So we talked about how important they are for preventing falls in the elderly, for performance, for decreasing pathology. You're going to have lifeless toes. Most people don't know what it's like to even use their toes.
Yes.
They're not
Yes.
grounding through them. They're not pressurizing through them. And our body was designed to use them. Like even just walking,
Mm.
again, when I'm walking with my friends, we talk about this and they laugh because it's so annoying to go for a walk with me. But when you walk, you should be
Yes.
saying those, they're designed for propulsion. And a lot of us there's no connection there. So just take 5 steps and push through your toes and then go back to walking normally. But
Mhm.
so the big thing is you won't be able to find your toes if your toes are squished together. So make sure you're thinking about what you're putting on your foot. Do you need that arch support? Do you need that 4-foot rocker? Because it'd be so nice to mobilize your big toe. Like, don't go in those hokas if you're young and healthy and have a good foot. Think about that because then you're strengthening and mobilizing your foot while you're going for a walk and you don't have to spend as much time doing my foot classes or doing foot drills and strengthening, getting all those tools. So that would be number one. Number two is every single person, because we grew up in this world, should carve out a little bit of time to be barefoot. And ideally, when they're barefoot, maybe do a few exercises for your foot, even if it's grab a ball and roll it, or do the stimulation exercises where you're just like foot wiping, or, I have like these textured mats where my kids brush their teeth, where I brush my teeth, and I just like move my toe, I wipe, I'm stimulating my foot. So this barefoot time, do a little strengthening, a little mobilizing, a little stimulating. Or if you haven't done any barefoot time, because there are lots of doctors and podiatrists that will say never go barefoot. You should always go straight from your shoe into another indoor shoe, that you never go barefoot. That was a thing for a while. Just start with 5 minutes barefoot. Start somewhere. It's about meeting your body where it is at. So number one, think about what you're wearing on your feet. Number two, some barefoot time and stack on some good stuff. Stimulate them, roll your foot, strengthen it. Number three really probably would be to actually use your foot when you're doing other things. So again, our yoga community is already thinking about this because you are barefoot, you're staring at yourself in the mirror, you're standing on one leg, and you were thinking about your foot. Whereas I would say most people in the gym, if you were doing a deadlift or a squat or a reverse lunge, they might think about their core. They're definitely thinking about their hip, but I bet they are not setting up their foot. But your foot is where the power comes from. And just take a moment, make sure everything you do, what is it that your foot's job is in this position? Even an overhead press, if you're doing something overhead, your foot should be grounded. Then you're thinking about your core and then going overhead, but thinking So if you are walking, like I was talking to, like just the foot should be part of yoga. It should be part of your gym routine. It should be when you're walking around doing groceries or in the forest. So what are you wearing on your foot? Your shoes. Do some barefoot time, but then use your foot. Take it to life and use it when you're doing other things. So those would probably be the top three. And I could go on. But yeah, let's leave it at those top three.
Okay. No, this is wonderful. Every time you're here, it is just so insightful, so helpful. You mentioned a foot class that people can sign up for. Can you share details of that or any other trainings and where people can connect with you?
For sure. I always have a foot mobility routine that's free. It's about 15 minutes and it's just linked to my Instagram, which is mvmt.101. It's linked. I have TikTok as well. I don't do as much there, but it's mvmt101. You can also find it on movement101.ca is kind of my website, and I have my free classes there. And I will always have a foot mobility one. And it is an eye-opener of, again, 33 joints, 26 bones in each foot. The movement that you should get in your hindfoot, your midfoot, your forefoot. And mobility is such a lovely place to start because you're getting sensory stimulation. You're getting all of those nerve endings that we were talking about. So stretch, you're getting some texture. Even if you're using just a tennis ball, it's texture. It's going to light up those nerve endings. You won't be getting vibration, but you're getting a rich amount of information. And sensory is what drives motor. When you do that sensory work, that is what develops that map of your brain. And that is where movement literacy comes from. If you have a fuzzy brain map, there's no way you're going to be able to dissociate your toes. You won't be able to you won't be able to control it when you go through the gait cycle. It's just going to be stiff. You have to have that basic cortical representation, a nice little clear map in your brain of those 26 bones, or you don't have movement literacy. You don't have the basic prerequisite. So it's such a great place to start. Mobility, sensory input, just a quick little routine. And then I do have lots of programs, 5-day challenges, 7-day challenges, 30-day challenges, just to connect your foot. And then also, this is one big thing, is a foot problem is never, ever just a foot problem. If you have a bunion or a plantar fascia issue, 100% you are missing some strength in your hip, likely some mobility in your hip. So that's part of why you're probably pushing off abnormally. Also, if there's some things that you really want, you need a dynamic rib cage. Walking, if you have a stiff rib cage, it's going to be way harder for you to get off of your foot. Your foot has to work so much harder. Tight calf, plantar fascia issues, Achilles issues. So you want to also just think about your rib cage. You want to think about your obliques. Are you stable and equal side to side? Because that'll make life really hard for one foot. And then hip stability, because if you're not strong there, the foot has to grip. So yes. So sometimes building that better base is also about build a little bit of a better body, and then that makes the base easier. So yes, lots of options, but such a good, just awareness and thinking about your foot. Say hi to them, stimulate them, use them a little bit, and it'll get you probably the biggest bang for your buck compared to any of our other body parts. I feel like it's the one that we haven't been putting much effort into. Most people think about hips. We're doing our spinal twists already. So if you haven't put much work into your foot, a really nice, quick, easy way to improve the rest of your body.
No, wonderful. I will link to all of that in the show notes. Once again, thank you so much for being here. And I'm sure all of us will look at our feet very differently with way more interest after listening to this. Thank you, Michelle.
Oh, thank you for letting me talk about all of this. I do love it. And I'm so excited that other people are willing to ask questions and play. And yes, it's great to have the conversation. So
thank you. Thank you so much for being here. As always, you can find everything linked at letstalk.yoga/listen. I'll see you next week with another episode. Until then, take care. Bye-bye.